Observe closely, for this is where the threads first frayed, where the unraveling began. A flash of white, a curve of crimson, a woman's smile, innocent perhaps, but linger and watch it dissolve, not into joy, but into a caustic shadow, sharp as polished steel. They say this smile was sweeter than sherbet, a tempting draught. Yet every soul who truly witnessed its ascent felt not sweetness, but the undeniable, chilling taste of steel on their tongue. A whisper carried on forbidden winds that no one was ever meant to hear. But hear it they did. For it was she, HURREM, who, with that very smile, ignited a fire, not in the hearths of the palace, but in the very heart of this vast empire. A conflagration that would tear, with ruthless precision, the thin, inviolable silk of our ancient dynasty into tattered shreds. Look now, through the gilded latticework, into the pulsing core of the harem. A universe of unparalleled luxury where every jewel gleams with untold stories, where finest silks whisper of forbidden desires. But cast your gaze deeper, past shimmering veils and perfumed air. See the darting, frightened eyes of concubines, each a pawn in a game they barely understood, yet deeply feared. Each a silent witness to the subtle shift in the very air they breathed. They felt the tremor, sensed the fracture, long before the walls truly began to crack. And there, upon the peacock throne, sits the Sultan. A monumental shadow, formidable, unchallenged, his authority absolute. Yet even his formidable presence could not contain the storm HURREM'S smile unleashed. This was not slow decay. This was a sudden, violent ripping, an intrusion, a betrayal of the established order, a challenge to the very bloodline itself. The rhythmic beat of the palace, once a steady drum of tradition and silence, now throbbed with ominous anticipation. And intrigue, so profound, so utterly forbidden, had taken root. The disaster was not merely coming, it had already begun, blossoming from that single audacious smile, a promise of poison hidden beneath a beautiful facade. The empire held its breath, poised on the precipice, bracing for the inevitable catastrophe. The air in the imperial harem, heavy with the scent of jasmine and unspoken desires, shimmered under the light filtering through stained glass windows. Every polished marble floor, every intricate pattern woven into whispering silks, every glint of gold leaf on carved wood glittered with silent intent. It was a world of breathtaking opulence, yes, but beneath its gilded surface pulsed a current of ambition so cold it could freeze the very soul. Here, tradition was the bedrock, a fortress built not of stone, but of custom, bloodline, and centuries of unquestioning obedience. She arrived, a whisper from the steps, an echo of a life brutally severed, a mere shadow of a concubine, a foreigner in a realm where every breath was a precisely choreographed movement, every glance a coded message. Do you truly grasp the terror of such an arrival? To be stripped of name, kin, and tongue, thrust into a gilded cage where women, like hothouse flowers, bloomed in fierce competition, their roots tangled in a soil of power and despair. Yet, under that initial shroud of fear, under the trembling veneer of the innocent, something else stirred within her. A flicker, a nascent flame. Her first days, her first weeks, were an education in the language of the unspoken. Silence became her cloak, observation her weapon. Her eyes, quick and sharp, became unseen blades, dissecting the unseen hierarchy, the subtle shifts in favor, the minute cracks in the formidable facades of her rivals. She watched how a seemingly innocuous gesture could bestow immense power, or how a single, ill-placed word could shatter a life. She learned the true weight of a eunuch's nod, the chilling significance of a dowager's dismissive wave, the potent danger held within the fleeting smile of the Sultan's favorite. Imagine, if you can, decoding an entire universe of veiled threats and hidden alliances. A maid, startled, let a silk scarf slip from her grasp. It lay, a splash of imperial crimson, on the mosaic. The wrong hand reached for it, not that of the girl who dropped it, nor a watchful senior, but a rival concubine, her fingers lingering a fraction too long, her gaze flicking, almost imperceptibly, towards the reigning Haseki. A subtle act of defiance, a silent challenge, understood by all who saw it, including our quiet observer. And later, in the shaded courtyards, a gaze, meant to be fleeting, held for a breath too long on a passing pasha, a silent pact of ambition forming in the depths of two calculating minds. Hurrem saw it all. She learned that in this game, every flower could conceal a thorn, every honeyed word a trace of poison. Every delicate fan, waved against the oppressive heat, could hide a calculating mind. The opulent chambers, designed for pleasure, were in truth battlegrounds. Her own first whispers were not spoken aloud, but etched into the meticulous patterns of her attention. A silent bow, held just a moment longer than custom decreed, offered to a woman whose favor was subtly waning. A carefully chosen moment to offer a piece of fruit to a neglected servant, earning a fleeting, silent loyalty. These were her opening moves, tiny shifts in the invisible currents of the harem, almost imperceptible ripples in the vast ocean of the Ottoman dynasty. The future empress was not yet born, no, but the crucible was being set, and the steel within her was already beginning to harden. The air in the palace, once merely thick with jasmine and ambition, began to curdle. A different kind of scent now clung to the heavy tapestries, the metallic tang of fear, the subtle perfume of poison. Do you feel it? That chill breath on your neck, even in the warmth of the Sultan's affections? For Hurrem, the smiles offered by day had begun to wear thin, revealing the bared teeth of her rivals beneath. Mahidevran, a queen cast aside but not yet broken, watched from the shadows. Her eyes, once pools of sorrow, now gleamed with a cold, desperate fire. A goblet of sherbet, sweet and sparkling, arrived for Hurrem one afternoon, borne by a maiden whose gaze flickered with an unnatural anxiety. Hurrem, ever observant, saw the tremor in the girl's hand, the way her eyes darted towards the door. The cup, a jewel-encrusted chalice, sat on her table, untouched. A silent sentinel to a silent threat. It was a message, delivered not with words, but with intent. A choice, a refusal. But Mahidevran was but one viper in a pit. Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier, a man whose intellect was as sharp as his blade, saw Hurrem not as a woman, but as a growing crack in the foundation of his power. A foreign seed threatening the established order of the dynasty. His moves were not crude attempts at poisoning. They were orchestrations, subtle currents that sought to drown her in its sea of suspicion and political isolation. He manipulated the very air she breathed, turning allies into distant observers, whispers into accusations. He would speak of loyalty, of tradition, all while subtly tightening the silken noose around her. This was the crucible. This was where the dance of survival transformed into a bloody ballet. For a long time, Hurrem had believed in endurance, in weathering the storm. But the storm raged, relentless, threatening not just her, but the very bloodline she carried, the children who were her shield and her vulnerability. The razor's edge had become her path. Remember that letter? A plea, perhaps, to a distant ally, a call for help from a world she had left behind. Its wax seal, once pristine, now lay shattered on the marble floor of her chambers, the parchment itself torn, never to reach its destination. Was it intercepted? Or did she, with a heavy heart and a hardening resolve, choose to break it herself? To sever that last thread of sentimentality? For the first time, she understood. Survival was not about waiting for a protector. It was about becoming the predator. The silence in her chambers after such a decision was deafening. Every choice now, every glance, every word was measured, weighted. She was no longer just the Sultan's beloved. She was a strategist, forced to navigate a labyrinth where betrayal was the common tongue. What price, do you think, a soul pays when it chooses to cast its own shadow over another? Not out of malice, but out of a desperate primal need to live, to protect what is hers. She was cornered, yes, but broken? Never. The smile, once a simple expression of joy, now became a weapon, a mask, a promise of a future forged in fire and ambition. And the empire? It had not yet seen the full measure of her will. Когда дым сражений рассеялся и дворцы наполнила оглушительная тишина, стало ясно, пламя, зажженное ею, переродило династию. Но какая цена была заплачена за эту корону, что пылала в руках Хюррем? Look closely, my dear. See the way the light catches the intricate patterns on the ceiling? That is where the Sultan's gaze often drifted, seeking answers in the ancient artistry, yet finding only the echoing void left by what was lost. From her chambers, a new kind of war had begun, not with the clang of steel, but with the insidious tightening of invisible threads. They stretched, unseen, from behind carved screens and heavy velvet drapes, snaking through the Grand Vizier's council, reaching into the very heart of the Janissary Corps. One moment, a whisper. The next, a decree of banishment, or worse. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the next tremor, the next sudden fall. The Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, a man whose roar had once made emperors tremble, now moved through his own domain with a quietude that spoke of a deeper, more personal conflict. He, who had forged an empire with his sword, now found his inner sanctum rearranged by a will as unyielding as iron, yet draped in the softest silk. He saw the loyalty of his most trusted men shift, subtly, imperceptibly, towards a power that resided not on the throne, but beside it. He saw the shadows lengthen, cast by a woman whose smile could disarm and whose intellect could dismantle. The pashas, grizzled veterans whose names invoked centuries of tradition, watched their foundations crumble. Their unwavering codes of honor, their deep-rooted understanding of male authority, their very concept of the Ottoman order, all began to fray. They spoke in hushed tones, behind closed doors, of the unnatural turn of events. A woman, once a slave, now dictating fates that even the Grand Vizier would hesitate to touch. They saw their meticulously built world, designed for men, by men, reshaping itself around the desires of one woman. The fear in their eyes was not for their lives, perhaps, but for the very soul of the dynasty. Do you understand the weight of that? To see the ancient, unshakable pillars of power begin to crack, not from an invading army, but from within, by the relentless pressure of a single, brilliant mind? In her own chambers, when the last decree had been sent, when the final, fatal silence had descended upon arrival, Hurrem would stand before her mirror. Not the grand, gilded mirrors of the imperial halls, but a smaller, more intimate one, reflecting only her. And there, in its polished depth, would appear not just her own face, the face of a queen, but the faint, shimmering specters of those who had fallen. Ibrahim, Mustafa, Hatice, a silent, watchful host, their eyes hollow, their presences a chilling testament to the path she had carved. What does a woman feel when she looks into that mirror? When the crown she holds, the power she wields, burns with the fire of so many sacrifices? Is it triumph, or a cold, relentless ache? The silence, my dear, was not peace. It was the crushing weight of what had been lost, what had been sacrificed, for a dynasty to be reborn in fire. And Hurrem bore that weight, alone, the architect of a destiny and the prisoner of its terrible, blood-stained cost. The whispers, once so sharp, now fade into a somber hum. The frantic dance of ambition, the clash of steel veiled by silk. It all settles, like dust after a storm. But the air, you see, it still carries the scent of what transpired. The scent of ambition, yes, but also of a profound, irreversible change. a change born from a smile, a will forged in fire. Her smile's legacy, steeped in poison and silk, became not merely a chapter in history, it became the last silk knot, forever binding this dynasty's fate to the shadow of her will. Can you feel it, this indelible mark, etched into the very stone of the palace? She was no angel, nor demon born of malice. She was a force, elemental and unstoppable, like the tide carving cliffs or a desert wind consuming all in its path. Her secret was never cunning in the way men understood it. It was an absolute, unyielding will to survive, to rise, to command, when all around her conspired to crush her very essence. A will so potent, it did not just reshape an empire, it redefined its very soul. Look closely at the bloodline that followed. Trace the paths carved by her ascent through the generations. Every act of betrayal, every silent death in the darkness, every whispered decree that sealed a fate, it echoed down the corridors of time. The grand tapestry of the Ottoman dynasty became inextricably interwoven with the lustrous yet dangerous threads of her design. The profound silence that descended after her final breath was not peace, but the heavy quiet of an empire forever altered, forever living in her long shadow. For those of us who watched from the deepest shadows, who saw the poison seep not into a cup but into the very foundations of power, the truth was stark, undeniable. The price for such magnificent power, for reshaping the world to one's desire, is rarely paid in mere gold or conquered lands. It is measured, you understand, not in decrees or victories, but in the countless souls consumed by its unquenchable flame. A profound and chilling thought, is it not? How much of yourself would you truly sacrifice for such a legacy, for an empire forged in the relentless image of your will?